In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss, including Zach Bogosian of the Sabres requesting a trade out of Buffalo. There's further reports suggesting we may see a deal go down soon between Montreal and Chicago. Plus, the Vancouver Canucks apparently want to add a scoring forward. And we have some updates on some recently fired NHL coaches, including Mike Babcock, Peter Deboer, and Jim Montgomery. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of teams to cover here today, and I want to kick things off with the Buffalo Sabres. Defenseman Zach Bogosian apparently has requested a trade out of Buffalo. Now, Bogosian, of course, spent the year at the beginning of the season on injured reserve, long-term injury reserve, has recently come back, but then has recently been a healthy scratch against their game versus the Nashville Predators the other day. Of course, the Buffalo Sabres do have a lot of extra D, which has been talked about for some time, that they're likely going to be trading one for a forward sometime soon. They just haven't found the right deal. Of course, as time goes on and they get more healthy, it's certainly going to create more of an opportunity for them to do that. Of course, Bogosian's name hasn't been the only one that's been mentioned. We've also heard rumblings about Colin Miller as well as Marco Scandella, but apparently Bogosian has put his hand up and requested a trade that very well might make things a little bit easier. Now, Bogosian, in a sense, does make over $5 million, has battled a lot of injuries here recently, and is a pending unrestricted free agent. So, of course, that, there's some pluses and minuses there about maybe being able to make a deal or not. Now, the other potential trade that we might see, as I mentioned, was a possible Penguins-Sabres deal. I mean, the Penguins have been trying to move forward Alex Galchenyuk. Things haven't really worked out since they acquired him from the Coyotes. Of course, once they get healthy, they're going to have a lot of extra bodies as well, and there's been a lot of talk that Galchenyuk would probably find himself being a healthy scratch and may have a hard time getting into the lineup. There's been some talk previously that the Sabres were one of the teams who might be interested in taking on Galchenyuk as a trade option. So, of course, with all of these things lining up now, could we possibly see a Bogosian for Galchenyuk trade or maybe some other parts involved? I'm not quite sure that would exactly be a one-for-one deal, but if you look at from a salary cap perspective, Bogosian makes just over $5 million, where Galchenyuk's just making slightly less than. So it's a fairly even number of money going in and out from both sides. So from that perspective, it wouldn't be too bad. But like I said, I'm not sure that's an exactly even swap there, but kind of depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. We could very well see other parts involved. I mean, the Sabres have other players who have been mentioned in trade rumors as well, and so have the Penguins, really. So we could possibly see a broader deal. It is quite a possibility here. But with Bogosian officially requesting a trade out of Buffalo, it has certainly fueled more speculation about a potential deal with the Penguins. At least both these players that we're discussing here, Galchenyuk and Bogosian, are both pending UFAs. So if either team is not really thrilled with how things work out, at least they're not tied to the player for any length of time, they could certainly try things out on a short-term adventure here, see if they can get into the playoffs, see how the players make out, and then consider extending or letting them walk as a free agent. But I guess we will see if these two teams hook up. So let me know what your thoughts would be on a potential Sabres-Penguins deal, if it would be a one-for-one, a bigger deal, or what moving parts here could be included in a deal to satisfy both sides. Next up, I want to discuss some news on some recently fired NHL coaches. Now, of course, as soon as Peter Deboer was fired in San Jose, there was a lot of people speculating that where he would land next, like what other NHL teams might look to bring him on board. Clearly, he's been one of the most successful recently, at least NHL coaches. Had a great run in San Jose. Of course, that was his third stint as a head coach in the NHL. Previously coached with New Jersey and Florida. Has a very solid record. He's known as a very solid, well-respected NHL coach, and I'm sure he will be given future NHL opportunity if and when he's ready to accept that. And of course, there's been a lot of talk about Mike Babcock as well since he's been let go from the Maple Leafs. Now, of course, in Babcock's case, we've heard several stories from former players that have spoken out against some, unfavorable things or things they were unhappy with in regards to his tactics as a coach in the past, and many wonder whether or not that would impact his ability to gain future employment or whatnot. But we've heard Elliot Friedman recently indicate on the 31 Thoughts blog that Babcock and DeBoer both appear to be ready to step away for the remainder of the year and not rush into anything. I think both of these coaches would be interested in coaching in the NHL again, and I'm not really sure that in Babcock's case it's really the stuff we've heard is going to prevent him from coaching again in the future. I mean, some of the tactics that he's used and some of the things we've heard from former players certainly are not favorable and look to be not some, great decisions. But ultimately, if he can show another NHL team that he's willing to, adapt and change his ways and, kind of move past those incidents and can show that he's learned from it and become a better coach for it, then I'm sure with his track record that he will be given another opportunity as well. But I would not necessarily expect any other NHL clubs to be rushing into bringing him on board sometime this season. There's a lot of interim coaches around the NHL. There very well could be some more guys fired. You just never know. We've had a lot lately. There's a few more, I think, that are still kind of on the hot seat. Of course, we don't know if any more of these coaches are being, going to have situations pop up to be investigated and lose their jobs for other types of off-ice conduct or other things besides team performance. Of course, that's a new trend that we've seen that we're not used to right now. Which kind of takes us over to Jim Montgomery here. Obviously, when he was released and fired from the Dallas Stars, there really was very little information given. There was some talk between Elliot Friedman on his 31 Thoughts blog, as well as another report from another European news outlet indicating that it could have been related to alcohol or some sort of situation involving that. Now, in Elliot Friedman's case, as well as any other NHL insiders, I'm sure there's times they hear things, whether it be something that they can confirm to be truth or rumors that they don't necessarily put out to the public right away. And I do, based on what he was saying on the podcast, where Montgomery likes to have a good time, and he said, he himself likes to have a good time, so he doesn't usually, frown upon others doing so, but he hopes he's never crossed the line, things like that. Kind of leads me to wonder maybe if he does know a little bit more information, and maybe there was a situation that stemmed from having a good time. Either way, we'll never really fully know exactly what happened in the case of Jim Montgomery. At least we don't think we will. We probably will hear stories at some point in time. But it does sound like it might be somewhat related to some kind of situation involving alcohol and personal conduct in an unprofessional way. So I guess we'll see if we never know anything further. But I certainly would expect guys like Deboer and Babcock to certainly resurface at some point. But it's not necessarily going to be this year. I think we'll probably see a case like we saw with Joel Quenneville, like when he was released from the Blackhawks last year. He took the rest of the year, had some downtime, had some family time, weighed out his options, and then came back during the offseason as he accepted the head coaching position with the Florida Panthers. I would think that's more likely what's going to take place. Both these guys had term under contract that were making pretty good money. So from a financial standpoint, there's really no reason to rush into anything. They could take some time and get themselves back on track here for their next opportunity. Now, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, could we see a trade between the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks? There's been a lot of talk about the Habs scouting the Hawk quite a bit this year, not only at the NHL level, but at the American Hockey League level as well, with even GM Marc Bergevin taking in many games between Chicago and Rockford throughout the current season. There's been a lot of talk that they very well would want to bolster their blue line ahead of a playoff push and potential playoff run, and that maybe they're looking at defenseman Eric Gustafsson. It's certainly a possibility. He's not making a ton of money. He's coming off a 60-point season. He plays the left side, which is where they need the help, and he's a pending UFA, so there's not a lot of long-term risk associated with a potential contract if things don't exactly work out. Now, there's been more talk again by NBC Chicago indicating about the potential of a deal here between these two original six iconic franchises. Of course, we've seen them hook up for trades before, and as I mentioned, Marc Bergevin at one point worked for Chicago. So he knows the management team there very well, knows a lot of the players have been around in the organization for some time as well. So it's certainly not a wild stretch of the imagination. We could see these teams hook up for another potential trade. Now, in Montreal's case, I don't think they'd be looking to give up a whole lot for a player like Gustafsson. They'd probably want to stick to probably some draft picks or maybe some unsigned prospects. They do have plenty of both of those assets to bolster their blue line or anything else they decide to do here. But Gustafsson does appear to be a potential target here for Montreal. Except we've seen these two teams hook up before. Wouldn't be surprising to see it again. But as time goes on here, there's more and more talk about a potential trade between these two franchises. Now, I also want to touch on the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, the Canucks got off to a red-hot start and were certainly a surprise team in the Western Conference and Pacific Division. Things have since kind of cooled off. Now they find themselves really in a battle for a potential playoff spot. Based on all the moves and all the progress of their young prospects who are now developed into core players for their NHL team, of course, the Canucks were expected to take some strides this year. And after seeing what other moves they made this offseason, I think it's probably fair to say that ownership and general manager Jim Benning certainly were pushing hard to get the Canucks to be a playoff team as soon as this season. And of course, right now there's some talk from Benning himself directly saying they would consider adding a scoring winger near the trade deadline if things work out Now, I do think it's fair to say that whatever the Canucks do will be largely based on the health of Michael Furlan. So far this year, he's been injured quite a bit, and whether or not he's available to them later in the season and for the playoffs, should they be contending for a spot near that time, will likely determine what they do here. Of course, Furlan was signed in order to bring in some physicality as well as some offensive punch. Certainly has put up some decent goal totals in the past for somebody who can play that type of role. And if he's not going to be available or end up going to be hurt, well, then that's certainly going to cause some issues. Now, the couple of issues, though, with the Canucks making an acquisition are that they don't really have a whole lot of salary cap space. They're likely going to end up using a long-term injury reserve to replace somebody in their lineup should they make an acquisition. And they also don't have their first-round pick, which they used to acquire JT Miller from Tampa at this past year's NHL draft. So they're a little bit low on assets that way. I'm sure Benning would be likely open to moving players like a Tim Schaller, perhaps like a Berchi or a Goldobin, players like that who right now haven't really secured themselves in a real solid spot in the lineup and would be expendable. But of course, what are they going to fetch you as well? Are they going to really get you a solid return? Probably not. I mean, Berchi and Goldobin are both kind of getting up there a little bit in age. Not sure at this point if they're going to be, solid, consistent NHL players. They're kind of fringe players right now. And Schaller certainly has had some better times in the past, but it could be a useful fourth liner for some teams. But not really sure those are going to be the guys to get you what they're looking for. But there's been some talk about Brendan Sutter in the past, possibly being traded as well. But of course, he's on LTIR right now. With another year on his contract and the injuries, and it's hard to say if he would be a piece that would really bring them back anything either. So as much as Jim Benning's talking about adding some scoring, I do think it's going to be relatively challenging. Now, I guess one good thing is they have a lot of their other forwards right now having some really solid years. I mean, you got guys like Horvat and Besser and Pettersson. In new addition, JT Miller's been phenomenal. Of course, even guys like Tanner Pearson are certainly picking up the offense as well. And of course, Quinn Hughes from the back end is having a solid year and will contend for the Calder Trophy. So we will see what the Canucks end up doing. I know they'd love to be able to move Louis Eriksson as well. It's something that's been ongoing for quite some time, but really that's unlikely going to happen. When he has played this year, he has not played well at all. So he's certainly not generating any interest with a bad contract, and also known for having a previously poor attitude as well for how things were handled in the past. So I don't see that happening anytime soon, as much as the Canucks would like it. So as much as Jim Benning would like to add a scoring winger, I think it's going to be rather challenging for him to do. And if he does end up adding, it's likely going to be somebody more in a depth role, would be my opinion. I just don't know if they have the assets to part with right now to really make a big time acquisition. But let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments so we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.